So as you can see here, there is a bit of a darkened bit here. You have Milton, that was my grandfather, Levi and Lavina, which were my great-grandparents, and then Frank, who is the great-uncle. And there's actually good stories, well, sad stories with a number of them, but we have visited here before. I told a little bit, I even told the story about Frank, but we're going to spray this down and just see if we can make this look a little bit better and go from there. So let me go get my equipment. We're right over here with Chuck. It's nice to be able to drive right up to this, just because right now I'm still being careful with how much I'm walking. All right, let's get going. Hey everybody, so we are here today in Outwood, Pennsylvania. We are here at Outwood Evangelical Lutheran Church, and we're here at the grave of my grandfather Milton, my great-grandparents Levi and Lavina, and then great-uncle Frank. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories, and this is the before. It's got a little darkening to it, so we're going to clean this up and hopefully get this back to the granite look and see if we can do that and go from there. But my grandfather Milton, he, out of my two grandparents, my grandfathers, because both my grandmothers had passed before I was born, really an interesting guy. We used to travel up every couple weeks on a Saturday to visit him. I just loved going up there. It was just such a cool road trip, and he really was an interesting guy. He was a door-to-door salesman. He originally had worked in the coal mines. Wound up having a cart hit him, broke his leg. So he wound up actually walking all over the place to sell things. And really loved my grandpa. Levi and Lavina. Levi was an interesting guy. Apparently he had quite the sort of grumpy temperament. And they had, I believe, it was 7 kids. Maybe it was as many as 11. But Milton was, I think, one of the youngers of the brothers. Frank was the oldest. And Levi was pretty brutal, notorious for that. His wife, Lavina, was a sweetheart. Now, they used to raise prize bulls. And unfortunately, Lavina would wind up being gored by a bull. The original story, I thought she lasted a couple days and then passed, but actually, in fact, she lasted about 3-4 months and wound up dying of gangrene. And after she passed, she was sort of the one that kept Levi in check, and after that, he became pretty bad. Frank, interestingly enough, he was down, it's like an Old West tale. He was down in Philadelphia playing the piano in a saloon. Somebody didn't like his piano playing or didn't like him, and they shot him in the back, and that's how he got killed. It's sort of like one of those tales that you'd hear in Old West tales. But so this is the before, and we'll show you the after. Hey everybody, so we're doing a re-recording of the audio. I had this video done already, and I filmed it live as I was cleaning the stone. So you guys are able to see the before, and then you'll be able to see the after. I'm going to put in a couple of the clips of the shorts that I did, just so you guys get a little bit better of a visual impact of what we did. This tombstone, I have brought you guys to this before. It's at Outwood Evangelical Lutheran Church, and this is where my grandfather Milton L. Miller, my great-grandparents Levi and Lavina Miller, and my great-uncle Frank are buried. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of their stories. It's a shame. It's one of those things that I just messed up. I thought that YouTube had completely downloaded it, and I needed some more room because I was up filming in Port Clinton and Schuylkill Haven today, and did not realize that YouTube it had a glitch, and it got almost to the very end of having it downloaded, and then so I learned my lesson. I don't normally have this problem, but it happened. So we came into this looking at this stone, and the granite itself, like the smooth part, was actually pretty good, and I wasn't sure, was the black part, because there was very little lichen, is the black part organic material, which it turned out it was,
and would it come off, things like that, because, I'm still new to this. So, once again, I use a cemetery organic cleaner that is safe for the stone, much like D2. And I use brushes that are either horsehair or soft bristle. You don't use anything like wire or too aggressive because you'll wind up damaging the stone. So you mean to do well in the beginning and your intentions are good, but you ultimately wind up damaging the stone. So I'm very, very careful with how to do this. And I said on a lot of these other ones, you can never use too much water because the water sort of protects the stone. So the first I will talk about is my grandfather, Milton L. Miller. And just some really cool information that I have about him. Uh, we used to go up and visit him every 2 Saturdays or so, and my sister and I used to love going up there. He would always have a pack of those the circus animal crackers, where it was in the little box and it sort of had like the circus train car, and I used to love those, and just they'd sit on the back porch, and they had like their own separate outbuilding. There was a porch there, and we'd all sit out there in the shade, and he would have birds, and so I got bird feeders, so, and chimes and all that. And it was just a really cool experience. He worked in the coal mines and then got injured, and his leg got broken when a cart hit him, and that was sort of the end of his coal mining days. So he would wind out going on to become a door to door salesman. And I've already talked about the stories about him and uh, Roger Brown. Milton's wife was named was Eva Brown, and so Roger and I somewhere are connected to the Brown family, and he always talked about how, he they lived up at Oak Grove at their farm, and Milton came by. He knew that Roger, when he was a little kid, loved the uh, old type, the original liquor, black licorice, and so he would always bring him a pack of that, and he just always fondly remembered Milton and everything about him. He was very much involved within the historical community. He was a Mason. Lutheran church is what he went to. They originally lived in Ravine, but he would live in Pine Grove towards the end of his life. Uh, but he was really an interesting guy. Had a lot of issues. My dad and he, I think he genuinely loved my Aunt Ruth and my dad, but his dad Levi was a bit of, I think the term monster is probably a little cruel. But he he was pretty brutal, and Milton was one of the younger children. I think there were 7 to 11 kids, and he was one of the younger brothers. And the story that happens next, I'll talk about Levi and Lavina, sort of changed the way Levi was, and he got a lot more brutal after a certain accident, and Milton sort of had to deal with that. Another cool story I'm going to share here at the end. I had gone up to Ravine yesterday. There's a cool card shop, like sports card shop, called Pop's Cards, and he actually knew Milton as well. So Milton had something. It was called Hoffman's Elixir. Back in that time period, they can't have that stuff now, but it was sort of cure alls and stuff like that, and some of it was snake oil, some of it legitimately worked, and this Hoffman's Elixir was really good for if you had an upset stomach. And this gentleman had said about, like, there was an orchard right nearby him, and his mom used to always yell at him and said, "Don't you go and eat all those green apples because you're going to get sick." And he said, sure enough, they were kids, they did it, they ate a bunch of green apples and they got sick. And she gave him this. It was like somewhat grape flavored, and then over time it would get sort of gooey and thick, and it really lost its taste, and it was gross. So who knows what was in it? But whatever was in it did actually cure stomach ailments. And funny enough, they used to call it either Milton Miller's medicine or Milt's medicine. It's just another cool story about my granddad and what he did. And they said there was another cool story. The kids had talked about, like, this guy, him and his brother had really wanted a dog, And Milton showed up the one day when he was doing his rounds, and he had two boxes, and he said, "I think I have something here that you might like." And here there was a puppy in there, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 we want the puppy." And it's just sort of cool. Like he knew his customers well, and probably came across somebody that had a bunch of puppies, and were just trying to get rid of them, and found a puppy for them, and just made these kids really really happy. Which seemed to be also, this gentleman said that Milton knew that he liked the old school Dots candy, and he would always have a pack for him, and that just seemed to be something that Milton would do. So now Levi and Lavina, these were my great grandparents. Levi was the son of a Valentine Miller. Uh, Levi would wind out owning what had been originally called, I think, the Mifflin Motel, but they called it the Sudberg Motel. So not only was it like an inn, it was also the post office for Sudberg. He also had a livery there. One of the unique stories is back during Prohibitionary days, the what was then what today is known as the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They would get off of the Reading Railroad that went right by that Sudberg Motel. They would rent horses from him, and they would go up into the gold mine region looking for these moonshiners. And somebody was obviously tipping them off because they never got found. They were always sort of one or two steps ahead. And it was cool. Another thing that got verified, Smokey Warren was a race car driver back in Greenpoint. He was a notorious guy, a free spirit, and it was always rumored that his dad had run the moonshine operations up in Goldmine, because there was actually quite a few moonshiners up there, and he just sort of looked over the entire operation. And even in my Boys of the Fallen Sun, the Risen Moon, that book, in the second book, the boys get hoodwinked into running moonshine on the old moonshine route that went from, Goldmine Greenpoint out through to what would eventually become Indiantown Gap, and then down to Fort Hunter. They would load the moonshine there at the Susquehanna River at Fort Hunter, and then that would go to like Philadelphia and Harrisburg and up to Williamsport and so on. It was really quite a large operation, but they never got caught, and it was just sort of a cool story there. The other thing that they did was they raised prize bulls. Now, unfortunately, this would take a really hard turn. Lavina was out, his wife was out feeding the bulls, and one of them got ornery like bulls do, and it gored her in the stomach region. And I had, from the original stories, it sounded like it was only a couple days and she passed, when in reality it was over summer, and she lasted for 3 to 5 months and wound up ultimately dying of gangrene, which is a horrible way to go. And she was an angel, and sort of kept Levi in check because of his temperament being so bad. After she passed, he was a completely different person and just was really harsh. And circumstances, whatever had happened with him, I always sort of talked about through the generations, it seemed like there was abuse and those types of things. And I always promised with my generation, with me, that would end and it wouldn't continue. And it was just sort of, even my dad, I love my dad, and we made our peace, but he made a comment about, he's like, I never wanted to become my dad. And just sort of a sad statement on just how things happened. But that was pretty brutal for Lavina and for the whole family. Last but not least, we talk about Frank Miller. Frank Miller is my great uncle. He was actually a free spirit, very much like Smokey Warren, but he was sort of a traveler, go around. I think he was the oldest son. He would die in 1919 in sort of an Old West type of incident. He uniquely, he would play the piano in these saloons, and instead of being the Old West, it was out in Philadelphia, and somebody either did not like him or did not like his piano playing, and they wound out shooting him in the back and killing him. And thankfully, Lavina, who had passed in 1915, didn't get to see any of her children pass. But it's just one of those unique stories that you're sort of like, that sounds like something out of the Old West, but here it was in Philadelphia. And it was just one of those things that happened. But that is sort of the history of everybody here. And Really happy with how the stones would turn out. So here is the stone after. Really turned out really, really nice. I did go back later and then I filmed a little bit more and I tried to scrub down because the scrub pad had just, it was done at that stage. But I'll go back and we'll do a little bit of a film for the final. But I didn't think it was going to get that clean, especially with not having the brushes that I needed because a couple had broken down. I did put a bunch of new brushes together. So the next stone that I do, I'll probably go up to Ravine and do Irwin and Carrie Brown's stone, which is the last of those four at St. Matthew's. But very much happy with how this turned out. And here's a little bit more video and some more stories just in general that I talk a little bit more about the stones.
So as you can see here, there is a bit of a darkened bit here. You have Milton, that was my grandfather, Levi and Lavina were my great-grandparents, and then Frank, who is the great-uncle. And there's actually good stories, well, sad stories with a number of them, but we have visited here before. I told a little bit, I even told the story about Frank, but we're going to spray this down and just see if we can make this look a little bit better and go from there. So let me go get my equipment. We're right over here with Chuck. It's nice to be able to drive right up to this, just because right now I'm still being careful with how much I'm walking. All right, let's get going. So here is the after. I am going to come back and do a little more cleaning because my brushes are reaching sort of the end of their lifespan. So I'm going to go and get a couple more, but it looks really, really good. History is out there, my friends.